and I can't see my little window of me, which I don't think it matters much.
Well, I can see you. You're pretty much front and center in the image, so.
Okay.
Well, cool. I think we're good to go.
All right.
So, by way of giving this a proper podcast introduction, welcome back to another episode of Scouting Stuff. You've got two of us this evening, and with a little bit of luck, there'll actually even be some video to go along with it, because I'm joined this evening. I continue to be Scouter Ken, of course, but I am joined this evening by Scouter John Kemp of why don't you just say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and your group?
Okay. Well, I'm from 5th Brant Troop, and we like to do outdoor stuff because that's what Troop does. And in particular, I like the outdoors a lot. And I discovered this thing called giant hogweed some time ago. So I've been kind of doing what I can to raise public awareness and remove some giant hogweeds. And we've got a little bit of help from the scouting community.
Nice. And the 5th Brant is based out of Ontario, correct?
Yes, we're out of Brantford, the city of Brantford.
Okay. So now, giant hogweed's a little bit fresh in my mind because I just had to redo my first aid training for my group. And we talk a little bit about, flora-based hazards to health that first aiders might be called to respond to and what they can do. And giant hogweed definitely comes up in that discussion because, and then actually just recently too, we were doing a thing, well, with tongue-tied, with Sasquatch seekers, right? Scouts Canada's little theme that's been going for the last few weeks.
Yeah.
The 4th week, the theme was feisty food. And so we did a bunch of different activities with the beavers around this, but towards the tail end, we actually did have a little discussion about just some of the plants that you'll find growing in the area that could be edible, but also why it's very important to always check with somebody who is an adult, because this is cow parsnip, this is giant hogweed. Can you tell the difference just at a glance? I mean,
Probably
the
not.
trained eye probably can, but the 5-year-old beaver almost certainly cannot. And so yeah, giant hogweed is just kind of percolated up a couple of times just in stuff that I've been involved in with the scouts as well. But since you are much more knowledgeable about it than I'm sure, why don't you walk us through a little bit about what it is and why it's so particularly nasty?
Okay. Well, it's as the name suggests, it's a giant plant. So you think right now, if you look in your yard, you might possibly have a dandelion growing. And in your garden, you might have some daffodils growing. And if you go down by the river where a giant hogweed might possibly be growing, it would be there and it would be larger than any plant you've got around. The leaves on it would be probably, let's say, a foot long, and there'd be two of those. So you could have a plant 2 feet wide, and you compare that with your little daffodil. And of course, it's poisonous already because it's green and it's the sap in the plant that's poisonous. So you wouldn't want to be accidentally walking through those. You certainly wouldn't want to use one for toilet paper, which is, of course, a valid discussion. What are you going to use for toilet paper? And big leaves are kind of handy. So that comes up. So it's a very large plant. It starts early. I got some pictures I can show about what the plant looks like at different stages, because that's really what we want to educate people.
Absolutely. Well, let's test the screen share feature, because if the video works and the screen share works, then this will be a really great YouTube video. And if not, you'll have to send me all the photos and I'll put them in the podcast show notes.
All right. So let's see if we can get this screen sharing to work here.
All right. Just adjusting a setting here. Got parsnip. Nice.
Isn't that opening? It's supposed to be opening.
There you
There we
go.
go. Okay, so there's your daffodil sprouts,
Mm.
and that's early April. And here we have mother's wort, which you might find. Oh goodness, some things happened. Oh, there's a fawn, and that's skunk cabbage.
I'm
Can you
waiting
see?
for it to
Can you see
update at
my
this
cursor?
end.
Yeah,
I
can
can see
you see
your
my
cursor.
cursor?
Well, I could for a minute. Now it's gone away. I don't know if you're like freezing up or what the deal is, but
Hmm. So right there in the middle of this purple thing, if you were to tear it open, there's what looks like a little coronavirus thing in there,
mm.
and
Well,
they
I
don't
don't know
sting
which
things.
purple thing we're looking at because right now the picture's a little bit frozen. But I mean, if you like double click on the image, it should like open it up full screen, right?
Okay,
In
so
theory.
you kind of see something poking out of the darkness in the middle there.
Is there like
That's
another
that's where
window?
the little flower would be.
Hmm.
All right, so there's another skunk cabbage. So this is what you find this time of year, and here's the giant hogweed
Well,
up
hang
in the
on. I'm
top
still
left.
seeing just your overall photo of, or sorry, your overall like just the folder of photos. I'm not seeing the individual photo.
Oh,
If I had to guess, when
this
you shared, did you just select to share like Explorer or are you sharing your whole screen? Because I think you might have just selected to share File Explorer.
says I'm sharing my screen. That's all it tells me.
Hmm.
So let's see if we can maybe stop sharing and try again.
Yeah, I'll give it one more shot. And yeah, if it gives you the
Okay.
option to like share just a window or the whole screen, just go with the whole screen.
Okay. I don't. So here's some options: share sound, share video.
As you do.
I don't see any other options.
Yeah, like when I click the
Hmm.
big share button, I get a whole, I get all my application windows, or um, actually, yeah, all I get are my application windows. So I can like
Well,
share
we
you
got
my
about
browser, my
six
mail
things
app, my
to.
folder.
Yeah, I got about six things to pick from as well. But when I click on, nothing happens.
Well, usually you'd have to do like the whole blue share button at the bottom, right?
Let's try that again.
Ah, there we go.
Okay. All right. So that's the giant hogweed plant there. Is my cursor alive now?
Yeah, I can see your cursor.
Okay. And then down in the right is Angelica, which isn't really particularly pertinent to the discussion, other than they both like the same area and they frequently grow together.
Looks very marshy.
Well, that's actually right on the water. That giant hogweed's growing in the water.
Okay,
All right, so let's back up here and start where we earlier
there we go.
were.
That's working a lot better.
All right, so there's the daffodil sprouts, early April. And then there's mother's wort, which is it sometimes goes through the winter. Bloodroot, which is fun. You'll find some of those.
I've seen those around.
Snowdrops come out in March. They come
Those
out
are
through the
cute.
snow. And here's your skunk cabbage.
Oh
And you can see the little
yeah,
flowery thing down in the middle. Barely. You tear it open, you find it's a little spear, just like a coronavirus.
can see it from here. The little nodules coming off it.
Yeah. And then now you've got some more green skunk cabbage, the familiar stuff. And that actually starts to smell. So this is all happening early April. Oops. Okay, so then here's we have the giant hogweed size of your foot.
Right.
And all the dead stalks from last year lying around it. And nothing else is growing. The ground is pretty green. We've got a lot of giant hogweed, a little bit of moss, some garlic mustard, and there's some more giant hogweed growing in the rocks.
Key for
And there's the
comparison.
water. So it's right near the water.
Okay. So it
And
needs a lot of
here's your
moisture then
garlic
to
mustard.
grow.
Yeah. And there's what happens if you dig one out. There's the root underneath, the little tiny
Whoa.
flower and lots of root. think my finger stuttered.
Hmm.
And there's a bigger one. So the size of that root is almost as big as my foot.
Oh wow, yeah, those tap roots are huge.
Hmm. So that one would probably have done its flower. So the way these plants work, they start off from a seed and they germinate in March and they'll grow a little bit of a root. In April, you'll get a couple little leaves sticking up and they'll grow a bigger root. And then when it comes winter, the green stuff dies and the root stays on over the winter. And the next year, it grows again and gets bigger. And then the next year, it grows again. So this one is probably a third year plant. That's why it's so big. And then typically in its third year, it'll go to flower
Okay,
and then it dies. So this picture shows up here is the stalk, the top of the stalk from flowering. And down here we have some little tiny seedlings, babies, and here is another one that's probably a second year plant. And that's the end of that runch. So we'll stop sharing the screen there.
cool. Now, while we're bringing up maybe the next tranche of photos, like my understanding, again from the first aid course, is like, I mean, in addition to the fact that it's poisonous, you don't want to ingest it. Um, it's also the sap is particularly nasty to get on you with a twist. Like poison ivy, brushing against poison ivy, it hurts pretty much right away. Poison oak, same idea. Like you instantly get the rash. Giant hogweeds, if I understand it correctly, a little different in that getting the sap on you doesn't necessarily trigger a reaction right away because it has to be exposed to sunlight.
That's correct.
But once it's
It
exposed to
takes,
sunlight, it's a nasty, nasty, almost burn.
yes, it is a burn. In fact, what happened? It's a two-step process. So the first step is that the sap from the plant begins to affect your skin, and it changes your skin chemistry so that you can no longer protect yourself from ultraviolet sunlight.
Mm.
So then you get this essentially full penetration or third degree burn.
So the
And
treatment for
that
sap
takes about,
exposure is or sorry, how long
yeah,
does that take?
it takes about 6 hours for the sap to affect your skin.
Mm.
And then the next day, or whenever you go out in the sunlight again, then you get the rash.
Right.
I found some pictures of the rash if you're interested.
We can keep those off the stream, I think. Keep it PG
Okay.
because they are pretty nasty. But
They can be, yes.
but yeah, so I mean, like the treatment for giant hogweed exposure is, like get it off your skin as soon as possible because like you only have a few
Yes.
hours before it has changed your
Right.
skin enough
So
that you're going to burn regardless.
the not the first aid aspect, but let's say the hazmat aspect that I'm familiar with. If you get the sap on you, you wash it off with soap and water within 20 minutes,
Mm.
and there's no problem. And I've experienced that works. I've definitely been sap exposed, dripping running sap right on me. Wash it off with soap and water, no problem at all. And I've also been burned, so I know I'm susceptible. When I didn't know I got sap on me, then I'd get a burn.
Mm. So if you have a couple pictures of like the fully grown plant, and like especially I
Yes.
saw there was like a cow parsnip maybe for comparison as well, or you had some stuff about like identical looking plants, I think it would be really good to like put that out there too, just because that's the stuff that people especially need to be on the watch for. I think is like those fully mature plants.
So in July, yes, I have some July plants here. Now, if I can get back to the screen sharing aspect.
Yep.
Nope,
Okay. Well, I'm
that's
seeing
not
the
it.
folder again. That
Just
works.
going to the wrong one.
Nope. One more try. At least that time I could see the picture change when you were like clicking around. So, but if you bring the picture up, then you can just share, the application window, the photo viewer, whatever it is.
It just doesn't seem to be doing what I'm expecting. I'm double clicking and it's getting bigger, but
Mhm.
definitely having trouble with this.
That's all right.
Get rid of that.
Well, that's what I mean. If you like double click it, bring the picture up, then click back to Zoom, and you can do the share, and you should be able to select that Photos app, and then that'll give us the full size picture of the plant.
That's what I thought I did, but we're having challenges here.
There we go.
So that's sharing now, is it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Not sure what I did different. So that's elderberry, which looks a little bit like giant hogweed from a distance.
Yeah. Leaves are a little different, but the flowers.
Yes, the flower, well, yeah, it's similar. Okay, here's your giant hogweed.
Mm.
So there's uh, July on an island. I have a paddle there because that's how I got to the island. I'm in a hazmat suit.
Can see that.
There's one without a flower, so that's a large leaf. So that leaf would be 7 or 8 feet across.
It's like rhubarb that's as tall as a sunflower.
Yes. Okay. I don't know where am I going? Angelica. I'm going the wrong direction. And here's some photo comparisons. I should mention that all of these pictures I'm showing you are publicly available on our shared Google Drive, which we can share that link later so everybody can go
Yeah.
and look at these.
Yeah. Drop me that link. I'll put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, because the whole point of this is education. Oh, that's going to be a movie. I'm not sure if that's working.
Well, I can see the video. I don't know if we have sound.
Okay, so
Not that
there's
it
an
matters.
angelica plant along the side of the river, and there's
All
a
right.
giant hogweed.
Just right next to it.
Yep. And there's no person in this, but I can give you some attestation that these are about 7 feet tall.
There's some more hogweed there.
Yeah. So that was a patch that got reported by a canoeist. And that's all there are, like a dozen little plants there.
And that's maybe a good segue into um, because I mean it is important to that people should be aware about this, because we do want scouts to be going on outdoor adventures, but part of going on outdoor adventures and having a successful outdoor adventure is being cognizant of the hazards that exist out there, whether that's your poison ivies, your poison oaks, or giant hogweed. Because the last thing you want to be is 2 kilometers into the bush and all of a sudden having to deal with a third-degree burn. That's really not a good situation for anybody to be in. But
Right.
beyond just raising awareness, your group and your own sort of volunteerism efforts are going a step further, if I understand correctly. And you mentioned like the
Yes.
canoeist reporting the hogweed. So what is it that your group really gets involved with as regards hogweed?
Well, I guess the biggest contribution that we have is coordinating efforts of different groups. Um, we try to get feelers out into a variety of groups. Of course, the government being one, the municipalities. We have a task force with different land managers from 4 different counties in the Six Nations, the Grand River, which is our local elected native council. And we have various groups that are river centric. Let's say the outfitters that rent watercraft and the canoe and kayaking clubs, the hunters and fishers. We have connections with those. So when they get a report, we can get those together, put them all on a map so that they can all see where the hazards are. And additionally, we like to help each other know where they are and potentially help each other out in that regard. Uh, we've got some landowners that are too old to actually venture down the cliffs to the water to take care of their plants. So we'll have sometimes get volunteers to go and help those. Um, we've coordinated with some professional exterminators to take out some large patches. with the owners. Well, actually, we just lined up the owner and the exterminator, so they took care of it that way. The biggest thing is most people don't know that the giant hogweed is out there, like landowners. They don't know it's on their property, so they don't know to take care of it. Once we let them know, then they usually get at it right away.
Nice. So
And
there
the
is an
other aspect,
eradication effort.
yes, the eradication by Ontario law is the responsibility of the landowner. And since this likes to grow along the edge of the water and in wet spots, why would a farmer go there? You wouldn't take the tractor down there. You wouldn't take the animals down there. So that's just waste area. You don't visit very often. So if some passerby or canoeist can tell you it's there, then you'd likely be inclined to take it out. And we find that to be the case.
Nice. Is it an invasive plant? Like,
Yes.
is it considered invasive?
Yeah, it came from the Caucasus Mountains as an ornamental. Gardeners brought it because it's pretty. I mean, it's beautiful when you have one. If you've got one of those in your garden, all the neighbors are going to come look at it.
Hmm.
And then what happens when you're done with it?
Yeah.
That's what the problem is when you're done with it and you just take the dried flower seed head and you throw it over the fence in the river because you don't want it anymore. And now it spreads.
Yeah.
So the seeds spread down the water course. They float.
Hmm.
But more importantly, I believe they get stuck in the ice. And then when the water rises in the spring, it takes the ice with the seeds attached and goes downstream and lands somewhere. So it gets
That
moved
would do it.
predominantly under the ice and with the currents. And that's why they grow along the water edge. That's where the seeds arrive by water and they need water to live. So they predominantly live right along the edge. So if you're out
Okay.
hiking on the paved trail, you have no problem. But if you're going to go between the paved trail or between the water edge and you're going into the wilderness area there somewhere, maybe you're doing a bathroom duty or you're just exploring, you want to check and see what's over there.
Yeah, go skip
That's
some
where
stones,
you,
right?
yeah, that's where you might get into some giant hogweed. So if you know what it looks like, we can share the planet together. If you don't know what it looks like, you might be sad.
Are there eradication efforts that you're aware of in other provinces too? I mean, you've mentioned Ontario, and obviously that's the context you are most familiar with. But like, are there other provinces that are also on board with, trying to line up exterminators and notify landowners and
Um, I haven't reached too far afield, but I have been to the Ontario Invasive Plant Council meetings many times. I've presented a few times. And the consensus there is that there's no group doing similar to what we're doing, uh, in that we're crossing the jurisdictional boundaries, trying to encourage eradication and education. There's a lot of giant hogweed in British Columbia. There's a lot in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. We've got a fair bit in Ontario. I'm not sure which province is worse, but they all have a desire to remove it, and there doesn't seem to be a concerted effort.
oops. Yeah, I was actually just looking up what Alberta uh, does for it. So Alberta does actually classify it as a prohibited noxious plant.
Right. So that's one
Uh,
step up from us. Ours is only a noxious weed.
yeah, and I'm just trying to see. So it talks here about over. I'll maybe throw a link to this into the show notes as well because it talks about. It's just some pointers about identification, a good photo of what the seeds look like, the stem, similar to a lot of the pictures you've shown. And it's yeah, prevention. Do not purchase and grow giant hogweed plants or seeds. Requires distance to establish. Talks about eradication costs in Germany, uh, but it doesn't talk about like what it doesn't talk about is like uh, doesn't talk about like sort of like a mandatory reporting or anything like that. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure where we fall on that, but certainly as a classification, it's classified as prohibited
Right. In
and
Ontario, the
noxious.
reporting is totally voluntary.
Mm.
Um, we endorse a program called EDMAPS. It's EDDMAPS.org. That's their website. and that's a North American-wide invasive species mapping system, and it's out of University of Georgia, I believe. So if you go
Neat.
there, so eddmaps.org, and you type HOG in the search bar, it'll complete that into hogweed, giant hogweed, and you
Yeah,
can see where they all are
just
North
pulling it
American
up
wide.
now. There's a species locator here.
Yep.
Species locator. Species distribution by other geographical locations, maybe. I don't know. I'm just clicking around. Oh, Canada.
So I was just looking through that
Hogweed.
yesterday, and I noticed that there are some reports in our local area. We're focusing on the Grand River watershed, and in that area, there's maybe 2 or 3 dozen general reports from the public. Most of the reports are by our group. There's a couple of small groups that are reporting. I think City of Kitchener reported a few, but by and large, each municipality deals with it in their own mapping system.
Yeah. Yeah, I just pulled up. What did I pull up here? Well, you know what? Maybe I'll do a screen share for a second here and just kind of show what EDD maps looks like. So I was clicking through. I pulled up like Brant or part of Brant. So we're in Ontario. We're kind of just north of Brantford and uh, in and around like Palmerston and just kind of outside of Brampton as well. And so lots of different species reported, but the giant hogweed. Maybe I'll just filter. Can I turn this off? I don't know.
I think you need to
Yeah, it's
go
just
back up.
lagging me a little bit.
Yeah. So the red dots tell you that there's a positive sighting. A yellow portion tells you that it's been treated. A green bit tells you that it's been removed,
Yep,
and the blue indicates that it's a negative finding, which means somebody reported it, and when they got there, it wasn't actually there.
gotcha. So like if I click here, oh yeah, I got lots of little locations beyond that. Whew,
What species are you looking at?
that was a periwinkle. I
Yeah.
didn't filter them all out.
Yep.
That's a Herb Bennett. I'm sure we'll find something. Anyways, the point is like, yeah, there's a ton of stuff in here. This is a
Yeah.
very comprehensive
And,
database. And I'm sure that,
and
if I kept
it's
filtering,
really
I would
easy
get
to
down to just
report.
the hogweed.
It's really easy to report. You go to the edmaps.org and then you click on the report a sighting. If you use your smartphone, it'll take the GPS coordinates from your phone
Perfect.
and the picture that you're taking and just sends it off to a reviewer. So everything you see on there has been scrutinized. It's not just random pictures.
Nice.
It all gets reviewed by someone who knows the plant.
Cool. So takeaways here, because Zoom is flashing me a warning that we got just a few minutes left. Takeaways. I mean, obviously, if, important to learn to recognize giant hogweed and tell it apart from other plants of very similar appearance. And like, we saw with like the picture of, say, the elderberry versus the giant hogweed, similar on the flowers, but very different on the leaves.
Yes.
The size of the mature plant is, of course, another factor. Um, Recognizing what to do if you're exposed to the sap of giant hogweed, wash it off very quickly. And if you can't get to within that 20 minutes, then I guess the second imperative is to make sure that that area of the body remains covered and sheltered from the light.
Right. For at least 48 hours. Yeah.
48 hours. I was going to ask what the
Yep.
duration of that was. So there we go. So you're going to be wearing sweaters for a couple days. But that is certainly better than suffering a very bad rash or a burn. So, and then beyond that, of course, is, the reporting part, right? If you encounter it, don't try and destroy it yourself because this app is still an exposure thing. I mean, maybe you and some of the people that you've worked with who have experience with the plant and the proper gear, the full body protection and all of that stuff, you know, leave it to the people who know what they're doing to get rid of it, but take advantage of something like this EDD maps, or if there's a provincial reporting infrastructure, um, to publicize it once you find it so that everybody else can be warned about it. And then hopefully someone can come in and actually like eradicate it properly.
So a couple of things we were kind of proposing is that some of the senior sections could pick an area of, say, a river and kind of like adopt that area and go and look for giant hogweed. And if they find it, then they can report that. And they can, have bragging rights that that piece of river is theirs.
Nice. Sort of like how people will like adopt a highway, right? They'll
Exactly.
adopt a
Same thing.
kilometer of highway, clean up the garbage.
Yeah. So I got a couple little things yet to add in here. A
Absolutely.
quick story. There's a local beaver colony. He was out for a hike on a Saturday morning,
Mm.
and one of the adults in the group said, "Hey, right over there by the water, isn't that giant hogweed?" And he said, "Well, maybe it is." And the path went right down that direction, so they decided to go a different way, and they reported the location to us. And a week later, we went down with a canoe to that same spot, and sure enough, that was a patch of giant hogweed, which then became a public display because we cut them all out that year. Next year, we went back and some had sprouted, so we roped it all off and put up signs. And for 3 years, that became a public education area.
Huh.
So the beavers did their job. They were caring for the planet and sharing.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Good job, beavers. And good
So
job to
the
your
other little
group for,
tidbit I have, if you can see my stuff here, this here is a stalk from a giant hogweed.
dang, that is big.
So yeah, that's the flower head's all broken off because they're very, very delicate. It's yeah, it's very delicate.
They look like, I mean, I've seen other plants similar to that. I can't think of the name of them, but there's a few that like they do sprout up and they do like almost like a reedy type stalk.
Yes,
Um
the
and
stalk is
then
definitely hollow.
yeah, and then yeah, they it's really delicate flowers that I mean you could almost crush them to powder like once they've actually like dried and served their purpose.
Mm.
Uh, so wow.
So if we're going to share the planet, we got to know what it looks like.
Absolutely. And hey, I mean, the Caucasus is welcome to it, but I could just as soon do without having to encounter it in the wild. So, well, all right. Well, thank you so much. And I guess I should just quickly explain with the last couple of minutes I have left that Scott or John did reach out. And actually, this was our second attempt at recording. The first one fell
Yes.
through, entirely my fault. Busy life just not yielding to the needs of the podcast, unfortunately. But Scott or John actually reached out to the podcast through the website, I believe, the contact form. Because you're very passionate about this subject, and it is a very good subject to raise awareness about for the reasons that you detailed. These are things that scouts will encounter when they go on adventures, and it is actually a way that scouts can serve their community in a certain sense to do their part in reporting it, contributing to its control and eradication, while also contributing to their own safety, and not having to deal with, rashes and whatever else whilst out on an adventure. So, so thank you first and foremost for reaching out and for making the time tonight. And I'm glad we could finally put this together. I do hope this recording works out exactly as I'm hoping it will, so I can just put the whole thing online as well as on the podcast feed. But this is now an open invitation for anybody else who has a particular topic that they're very, very passionate about, that pertains to scouting and pertains to serving their community. You're more than welcome to hit the contact form as well. And it might take me a couple tries, but I will try and get you on the schedule. And we can spread some really valuable information that way, I think. So thank you so much, John. Was there anything else that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered most of it. The big deal was identification and safety.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you so much for reaching out and for your time this evening. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening. And until next time, be prepared.